All right, Herb. Thanks so much for sitting down with me. The one thing that's always interested me in your work is that you have, in the 30 years we've been working together almost, you've always called yourself a clothier. Now, what does that mean?
It's really an old term that even before I got in the business had pretty much fallen into non-use. Clothier is somebody who provides quality clothing specifically to men, but who is the equivalent of your stockbroker, your attorney, your accountant, your realtor in a particular area that men need expertise, but generally don't either have the inclination to have it or the time to have it.
So when you say it's an old term, you do very custom stuff and you deliver a particular service. Would you say that in the old days, the sales folks at like Brooks Brothers or places like that would also view themselves as clothiers?
As a rule, I would say yes. The even older term, which you still hear occasionally, I think for me is a little pretentious, is haberdasher.
Oh, haberdasher, yeah.
Yeah, but clothier just seems to fit. In my case, I don't sew other than being able to sew a button back on for somebody.
Yeah.
I really don't sew, so I'm not a tailor.
Okay.
But I do take the measurements and style clothing for my clients so that they look the way they want to look, right. And clothier just seems to be most appropriate.
I remember at some point in the last few years, certainly since I moved back from DC, at one time you made the comment that folks coming up behind you, younger folks getting into the clothing business, don't view themselves as clothiers. Now, do you agree with that? And if you do, what do they view themselves as? How do they view their jobs, their roles?
It seems to me that today, there would be exceptions to this, that yes, they would want to consider themselves clothiers, but generally younger people coming into the business seem to be more interested in fashion than style. And I've always had the distinction that style is what's right for you and fashion's what some guy in New York wants you to wear. And fashion is driving the clothing business more and more. There are exceptions to this.
Yeah.
In Louisville, I would call Fashion Post the lone exception to this these days. But the stores are driven by fashion. Even Brooks Brothers has gone a long way towards succumbing to the fashionista look.
Got it. Rather
than doing what made them great.
Got it. Interesting. So, in your view, what did make Brooks Brothers great?
Classic styles that one could buy. Classic styles and quality pieces that one could invest in and keep with proper care, almost literally as long as they wanted to.
Yeah.
Investment clothing versus turnover clothing.
Yeah. And along with fashion, would you say that more and more purveyors of clothing today are more and more about that sort of turnover clothing? Isn't that sort of society-wide too? You have these iPhones, have these computers, have these TVs. They're not meant to last for 10 years. They're meant to last for 2 years and then throw them out and get a new one, right?
Disposability and of the moment dominate our culture, and from my perspective, are ruining our culture.
Okay. All right. So let's take this in a slightly different direction, which is you and I right now are wearing blazers, which
uncommon?
It'd be uncommon. The world has just gone casually. Part of that's COVID, part of it's staying at home and so on, but part of it's just the world is going casual. Tell me about your business, how it's evolved, and how it's doing in an increasingly casual world. Day, nighttime, everything seems casual.
It's a good question. Early on, kind of during the .com phenomenon when the casual things first started to appear on the scene. Caught us off guard, but what happened immediately at that point was suit sales dropped and sport coat sales zoomed, just went way up. It put us in a position where we were forced to and were able to get into providing a lot of knit shirt, knits, more casual pants. Eventually we got into jeans, and if you'd have asked me when I started, would Tom James ever sell jeans, I'd have said no.
Right.
But we sell a lot of jeans. In fact, we have a separate company that partners with us that's based in Mississippi who sells custom blue jeans that are amazing. But what the trend has come to lately is that, especially the younger folks, what we're seeing now is people who don't wear a suit every day, don't buy 3 suits, but they may spend the equivalent of 3 suits for one that they will wear when they need one.
Got it.
And they'll invest more in a nicer cloth and a nicer make than they might have done when they had to buy 3 at a time, just because of the daily dress requirements of their work.
And if you have to buy or have only one suit, what's your recommendation for the one suit?
Will never be anything other than a navy or charcoal plain. Now that doesn't necessarily mean a complete solid, because something like a tick weave or a nail head or even a bird's eye can function in that role and have a little bit more interest. But just a plain charcoal or a plain navy, I call them Marion and Varian suits.
Yeah.
And if you accessorize them properly, you can get almost any occasion wear out of them, from a semi-formal evening like cocktail reception or political reception to just a change of pace day where you wear them with a tattersall shirt or a check shirt and a fun tie, or even like a solid knit tie or something like that.
Are knits like a new thing? I read about knits all the time now, and I don't remember that growing up, but I think...
You're not old enough to remember it.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
When I was in high school, we wore square-bottomed knit rooster ties.
Yeah.
And I just happened to be on Paul Stewart's website today. No, I'm sorry. Jay Press's website. And they had some of the most beautiful striped knit ties I have ever seen.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, those are cool. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm not old enough to know that it would be the 4th time around, but basically this is the 3rd time around for it.
3rd time around. So what, the first was like the 50s,
First
60s?
was in the 50s and early 60s, and then a friend of mine used to say, you're channeling your 80s today. I don't remember it at the time, because at the time I probably would not have worn a knit tie.
Yeah.
Now I have every color I can get my hands on, because
Of knit ties?
I live in sport coats more and more, and knit ties are great. And they're great for wearing with patterned shirts. And if you can be dressed up because you have an event or a meeting that requires dressing up, but if you've got a knit tie and a cool shirt on, you can just unbutton the collar and loosen the tie a little bit and go in someplace that you need to go that's much more casual and not look totally out of place.
For people today, or somebody today, I mean, it doesn't have to be Louisville, it can be anybody, that you think that guy nails it. That guy's got his own sense of style. He knows who he is. And he just looks great in whatever setting he's in. Can you think of anybody?
This is very limited sample, and I'm going to alienate several of your readers.
Yeah.
But I think Tucker Carlson dresses great. He's very dressed up preppy.
Dressed up, preppy. I saw him in the airport once. He's a tall dude.
He probably is. I don't know.
He's a taller dude than
I've
you
never
think,
seen him live.
And so I recognized him immediately, but the trick was he was not wearing his tie, and so it was just so strange to see him without a tie.
I think for his role, and I'm reasonably certain he doesn't choose his clothing.
Oh, yeah.
But I think Joe Biden always looks great.
Mm-hmm.
Don't think much of him, but I think he looks great.
Yeah.
So he by the way, he always has a perfectly tied tie with a nice dimple in it. It's one of those little things that, for lack of a better way to put it, separates the men from the boys, or the well-dressed from the not so
I
well-dressed.
have never been able to get the dimple right.
But we can have practice session.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about style, fashion, men more trending towards fashion these days. What are some trends in men's style today that you actually like, that you applaud, you're a fan of, if anything, maybe nothing?
Like the continuation of wearing a jacket. I think one of the things that I enjoy doing more and more myself as I transition in my career is wearing a jacket with jeans. I have jokingly said for a long time, because I'm not a man bag guy, that if you're traveling, you either have to wear a jacket or a purse.
Right.
And when I never get on an airplane without it. It may just be the oldest blue blazer in my closet, but I never get on an airplane without a jacket.
That is so rare. I remember the first time I went on a plane, the first time I remember, I looked very similar to what I look like now. I had khakis on, had the blue shirt on, and I had my tiny little blue blazer on, and it's probably been 12, 14, 15 years since I wore a blazer on a flight.
Yeah, habits are hard to break, and that's not one I want to break. But it's just, I guess, for lack of a better way to say it, it's a way of life for me. It just depends on where I'm going, what the story is, whether I'll actually put a tie on. And if I do, it'll probably be a knit.
Okay, so here's a chance to pull the arrows out of the quiver. So what are the things in men's style today? What are the trends that you don't like, you don't applaud, you wish would go away?
Just the general sloppiness. I guess the thing that, this is an anecdotal situation, but it expresses to me what's wrong.
Okay.
Anytime I go out to dinner, and first of all, it's impossible to go in a restaurant anymore, even like the English Grill, and see people dressed properly.
Yeah.
The general sloppiness, but I think it's most illustrated in two things. One, it's very frustrating to go to the ballet or the orchestra and see people show up in blue jeans and shirts or blue jeans and sweaters and I'm talking about evening, like the 8 o'clock. Likewise, I mentioned this, going into a restaurant. And I'm not talking about a 5-star or 4-star white tablecloth situation. I'm talking about just a nice semi-casual place, but a nice place. And invariably, the lady in the couple has taken the time to dress up, at least in an appropriate way. It may be dressy casual, but nevertheless,
it looks nice.
Looks nice. Looks like it's an important situation. And regrettably, more often than not these days, the guy with her looks like she picked him up on the corner on the way so she'd have somebody to go with, or else if she was backing the car out of the driveway, he turned the lawnmower off and hopped in the car with her. And I have been in places where it has taken all my willpower to not go ask her where she picked him up. Because he does not look like he belongs with her. And I think it's totally disrespectful both to her, to the people in the kitchen cooking the food. See, I think when I go to a musical or theatrical performance, the people putting on the performance have worked hard to give me their best. I feel like the least I can do is give them my best in return. That doesn't mean black tie, although sometimes that's fun too, but just to look like you belong there.
Interesting. So these two kind of writers, I read their stuff, Michael Williams in Los Angeles and David Coggins in New York, have this sort of sense about style, which is really style is about like making an effort, like trying. And I think just what you said echoes what some of the things they've written about. A lot of men today are not trying, especially men, you're right, are not trying. It's like not trying to put forth the effort, not trying to signal outside of themselves that they know what they're about and that they deem an event worthy of the effort.
My partner Dougal, who operates our cloth company, Holland Cherry, the United States division of it. It's based outside of Edinburgh. Mm-hmm. He grew up there. And Dougal's statement about that is the way I dress for an occasion is a reflection of the esteem and affection in which I hold the event and the people in attendance.
Yeah, that's well said.
And that has become my iconic statement on that.
Got it.
Put another way, when I dress up for others, mm-hmm. I don't mean that I'm trying to impress them.
Yeah.
I dress up so that they see that they matter to me.
Right.
It's just like table manners are virtually non-existent these days. The things in our society that expressed interest in and respect for others mm-hmm. being whittled away mm-hmm. little by little. And to me, dressing properly and helping others do so is one of the ways I can fight back.
Let me move to a different sort of set of questions. So I'm a pretty oddball body type. Very narrow legs, narrow arms, narrow hips, no butt, very narrow shoulders. For the average, maybe slightly below average height, very lightweight. For somebody like that, what are some style tips you can give to help that person look his best?
I'm gonna say this and then work my way back into that.
Okay.
I think that one of the most important things any gentleman can do, this is equally true for women, but that's not my area of expertise, mm-hmm. is find someone who either understands your sense of style and is willing to take the time to understand your life, where you go, what you do, and knows enough about colors and patterns and styles to take you where you are and help you look the way you want to look and need to look for whatever you do. My answer one is find an expert, and then let that expert say things like what we do for you. We try to get clothing that isn't so tight that it makes you look like a scrawny waif, but we don't want stuff that looks like you're wearing your big brother's clothes.
But it's also, it seems like that advice would be true for the opposite of me too. Really tall guy, really big guy, an expert who understands him, life situation, where they go, what's important to them matters to that person too.
Simple little things. My caveat is you can always say, I don't care what is going to look best on me. Mm-hmm. I like it this way. Mm-hmm. For instance, we're about the same height. Mm-hmm. I really like cuffs. Most guys these days don't wear cuffs. A cuff, in a sense, can be a small hitch that makes you look slightly shorter. Mm-hmm. But I just like the way a cuff finishes.
On pants?
On trousers.
Got it, okay, all right.
On you, a 2-button coat looks way better than a 3-button coat because it allows you a little longer opening.
Oh, I think it's 3-button.
That's a 3-button, but we rolled it through the middle button, so it has the appearance of a 2-button coat. Yeah. It's a classic traditional style.
Got it.
But you placing the button at the ideal point to make you look as tall as possible
Yeah.
to make your shoulders look as wide as possible and make your waist look as slender as possible.
Okay.
Those kinds of things. The size of a trouser leg, the height or lack thereof of a shirt collar, depending on the height of a neck and how large a neck someone has. The proper shirt collar,
Right.
both in height and in spread, make a difference.
Okay.
And again, this is one of those places where fashion seems to have run amok over against what really looks good on people, because everybody wants to wear big, wide spread collars.
Collars, yeah.
And my family used to just laugh at me because, like, during presidential debates, I would just literally be sitting there during the debate going, that guy looks like a clown. Somebody who doesn't know what they're doing put a shirt collar on him that's 3 times too big for him.
Yeah.
In fact, I remember one time when Mitt Romney was running for president, I actually sent an email to his campaign and said, you people are screwing up. Those collars are too big for him. He looks like a
Oh, that's amazing.
fast-moving fat cat. And the next time I saw him in a debate, they had changed his collar and it was just right. Now, whether that had anything to do with it or not, I have no idea. I take no claim, but it was
That's so
really
good.
funny that it happened that
Oh,
way.
that's so good.
But on the other guys, the guy that was governor of Texas for so long, I can't even think of his name. Don't want to necessarily remember. Perry.
Oh, Rick Perry, yeah.
Rick Perry wore these big,
He had
huge
collars,
collars,
yeah.
and he had a small neck, and
Yeah.
he just looked stupid.
Oh, that's so funny. That's so good. Let me ask a different question, which is, tell us about like one. I think of it as probably an accessory, maybe not clothing, but an accessory a man should buy that's heirloom quality that he could pass to his son or son-in-law or whatever it is. Like, what's a really great item for him to use during his life, but that the point isn't that he has it. It's really the point that it carries on in the family beyond that. If anything, maybe that's an outdated idea.
No, I don't think it's an outdated idea. I'm not a watch guy. In many cases, that would be something that would be a legitimate item to fall in that category. I'd be more inclined to say a nice pen. If I didn't destroy my briefcases so much and be so attached to them, I'd say a nice briefcase. But
yeah.
my 35-year-old Atlas is about destroyed, and it's hanging on to finish my career with me.
I've had some amazing briefcases that my father gave me. I had one from Levenger that I loved. I had one from Coach that I loved. I've now got one from Colonel Littleton that I love. But 10 years with a briefcase puts a lot of wear and tear. 20 years. Dad had briefcases that 20 years, 25. Uncle has some. But much more than that. And it just, unless it's really German built.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm going to put a twist on it.
Yeah.
Back to clothing. One of my now deceased clients from Paducah was his son called me up one day. Both sons are clients of mine. And now the 3 grandsons are clients of mine. So it's a 3rd generation legacy kind of thing. But he called me up and he said, my dad's outgrown his tuxedo and he's giving it to me. His dad was in the Army Air Corps, Air Force, and was stationed in England in the 50s. And he had a dinner coat made there on Savile Row. Absolutely one of the most beautiful pieces of clothing I've ever seen in my life. He had passed it on to his son, who happened to be the same size. Okay. So we did some small alterations, and he wore it. And then when he quit having any interest in dressing up for he gave it to his son. So the 3rd generation is now wearing this absolutely gorgeous dinner coat, black grosgrain shawl lapel, to replace it on Savile Row, or from me getting it at Oxford, which would be the equivalent. it'd be $7,000 or $8,000.
Yeah, that's awesome. What a cool item. Oh, that is so neat.
My favorite thing at this point in my life is when I get a legacy client, especially third gen.
Yeah.
An awful lot of my second gens, most of my third gens are in Paducah. So it's people the grandfather was a friend of my dad's. I knew him as a little kid. The kids were more my contemporaries, and now they're kids.
Yeah, I think that's great.
It's the same thing for me. Both my sons are relatively close to my size, and so we interchange clothing back and forth. Like when John's getting rid of stuff, he'll send it over to the house, and it's mostly casual stuff, and I'll go, yeah, I could use those khakis. And then Aaron's whole closet, except for a couple of things I've made for him, is recycled clothing of mine that's 18 or 20 years old.
All right. I've totally stolen this idea from a podcast I listened to about economics by a guy at George Mason University named Tyler Cowan called Underrated, Overrated. So I'm going to say something. You tell me whether it's overrated or underrated in your view. All right?
Okay.
All right. Allen Edmonds shoes.
Regrettably, currently becoming overrated.
Now, why do you say that?
The company has changed hands numerous times since we started selling them, and I had just watched the quality slip, and perhaps as importantly, the shoe designs just go off the rails. It's very hard for me now to find shoes that I would really like to buy on the Allen Edmonds thing.
Yeah.
Alden is a shoe company that hasn't changed what they do.
Yeah, I was about to ask about Alden then, yeah.
Alden it's probably rated correctly. It's just far too unknown. Alden is a great shoe company, as is a certain company called Crockett and Jones. We both know.
Great shoes too. All right, Ralph Lauren's impact on American style. Overrated or underrated?
I don't know how to answer that way, but he has had such an amazing impact. The impact has affected those who are in the prep trad world mostly. Okay. The Purple Label gets into the fashion world, but for a guy that started out as a tie salesman, he has really had what I think is generally speaking, a positive impact on dress culture in America.
So would you say that's underrated or overrated? It seems like he's so pervasive. He does the Olympic teams. He does these sports teams. He's so out there in the culture.
That's why I'm struggling to answer it. I'll say underrated, but that's just because I think his impact is so extensive that it may not be fully appreciated.
Okay, all right. How about online clothes shopping?
Definitely overrated. If you go back to what I said earlier, the single most important choice you can make about your appearance is putting yourself in the hands of someone with whom you can have a good relationship, where he knows you or she knows you well, and therefore you can work together to build what you want.
Overrated or underrated? Fountain pens.
Definitely underrated.
How come?
I'm 72. I grew up in grade school writing with a fountain pen. And I still think there's nothing in the world that's as enjoyable an experience in the realm of communication. There's nothing like sitting down with a nice piece of paper, maybe to write a thank you note or something like that. Sitting down with a nice piece of paper and a good pen and just writing a note. I never got good grades in penmanship. I had to spend summers sitting at the kitchen table practicing my writing because it was so bad, but I love writing with a pen.
Got it. All right, overrated or underrated? LSU football coach Brian Kelly.
In his own mind, he's the most underrated. In my mind, he may be the most overrated. And I think within the next 2 years, we'll know that.
So, overrated or underrated? Baseball hats when you're not at the ballpark.
Now, I have to ask you a qualifying statement.
Sure.
Bill forward or backwards?
I am usually bill forward, but not always. Mostly bill forward.
If you're not catching a baseball game, you don't need your cap on backwards.
What about a cap on at all?
I love wearing baseball caps. I need to cover my head from the sun. Sometimes I'm just too casual to wear my lovely Optimo straw hat.
Yeah.
But I hate flat brims with a passion, and the old caps that you could curl and shape are getting virtually impossible to find, especially the ones that I would like to wear.
Yeah, a lot of them now, they do release the hats like in a variety of bills and so on, but a lot of those are like, it's every season. Right now, baseball, it's the spring training cap, and I looked at the one for the Nationals. It sucks. It's ugly. It's all red. It's just ugly as sin.
The average age of the caps in my closet may be 15 years.
So wait, let's go back to Allen Edmonds and Alden. What's another great shoe brand, American or otherwise, whatever, besides Alden and Crockett and Jones? And I'm talking men's shoes here.
Right.
And I don't mean Ferragamo or
well,
Gucci
of course,
or whatever.
the iconic
something I haven't heard
ultimate
of.
is John Lobb.
John Lobb.
Yeah.
Is that L-O-E-B?
L-O-B-B.
L-O-B-B.
And they're based in Paris, but I think the shoes are made in, if I'm not mistaken, the shoes are made in Northampton. Interestingly enough, the British shoemaking industry, at least at one time, was centered in Northampton because they raised cows and there were lots of oak forests.
So you had the leather and the wood, you're all good to go.
You got the oak bark to use in the tanning, and most American shoes, Alden may be an exception, I don't think so, but most shoes these days, if they're actually leather, which is becoming rarer and rarer, most shoes these days are chromium tanned. It's a much faster process, but it doesn't build the durability and quality into the shoe.
Mm-hmm. What we were talking about, just have something, have for 2 years, throw it away.
My shoe repair man went out of business. And one of the reasons he closed down after being in business for 25, 30 years is that the shoes are no longer made to keep and repair. They're made to wear and dispose of.
Right.
And so the number of shoes he was getting just wasn't worth keeping the doors open. But for instance, the Crockett and Jones shoes I had them, wore them a lot. I don't think I changed the sole on any of my Crockett and Jones shoes until they were between 15 and 20 years old, because the oak tanned leather, especially in the soles, just is durable.
What about Church's shoes? I remember Dad.
Churches are still good shoes.
Uncle always talked about Church's shoes.
Church is a good shoe. I haven't, other than his, I haven't really had any exposure to them lately. I haven't seen new Church's shoes. I'm assuming they have held the line because they would have to maintain the price point they're getting.
Yeah. All right, Herb, a couple last questions. I'm curious, just you're entering this phase of semi-retirement, 3 days a week? 3 days a week.
Allegedly.
So how long have you been a clothier?
46 years.
Okay.
In 10 days, 46 years.
So 46 years. Okay. So by the time people read this, 46 years. Okay.
Yeah.
So what have you learned about the world or human nature because you're a clothier, because of your job, that I or others who are not in that world haven't learned?
I'll try to come back and answer that. I'm going to put a slightly different twist on it first. Because of what I sell, my relationship is different. in some respects, it's a more personal or more intimate relationship than the fella that sells them their car or whatever. I've been in a lot of guys' closets. I've been in a lot of people's homes. When we're fitting clothes, a lot of times people will say things, but I've always been an observer. I try to watch and try to learn. And the lesson that I feel like has been most important to me is because I sell expensive clothes. Mm-hmm. I deal with people who, some of whom are new money, but a lot of generational money folks. Mm-hmm. And I always watch and see over time what happens. How I watch and try to get a view of how they raise their children. Mm-hmm. And then I try to watch and see what happens with those children.
Yeah.
And whether the values that made me respect the parents so much mm-hmm. get properly passed on. Mm-hmm. Or sadly, sometimes the values that I observed serving them are passed on, and kids don't necessarily turn out well. I've seen all the different things, and when I see families where the second and the third generations are great people, I just have intense respect for that.
Yeah.
And have tried to learn from them what I could. Now, that's not necessarily something you wouldn't learn. The other thing is just watching people and just seeing how they care about how they look. I love seeing people who just care about others, who are givers and not takers. Mm-hmm. And obviously in this business and in the various circles in which I move, I've seen it all.
Last question. 46 years and 10 days, going into semi-retirement. What are you looking forward to most?
I would be not telling you the truth if I didn't say hanging out with Ian.
Your grandson? Yeah.
Yesterday was the first day I really didn't work, because 2 weeks I was working the 5 days. And Barb texted me and says, "You want to go to the zoo today?" And I said, "Heck yeah."
Yeah, sure, yeah.
We met at the zoo about noon and stayed till about 2 and
yeah, it's awesome.
Had a blast.
Isn't it great?
It was
That's
great.
So fun, yeah.
But I have a lot of things that I would like to read and in many cases reread. There are a lot of books I read in college that I dipped too hard into the Cliff Notes. I need to go back and actually read the book cover to cover carefully.
What's one that comes to mind? What's the one that the top of mind one?
I don't know if this is because of the whole Russian-Ukraine thing or because I actually heard a gentleman talk about it at a classical school conference, but the Brothers Karamazov, that's a big undertaking.
It is a big undertaking, yeah. Right.
It's going to take me a while. There was a book that was included in the reading list for omnibus curriculum that we used at our school. The Name of the Rose. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not. It's a novel written by I believe he's an Italian fellow. But he writes it from the perspective of being a young 13th century monk. And it's a weird book, but it's fascinating. And I've always wanted to read it. And when I got COVID, I pulled it off my son's shelf because I was sleeping in his room to stay away from Barb. I pulled it off the shelf and started reading it, and it took me 2 months to finish it, given the amount of time I had. But
that's wonderful. Yeah.
I really, the old joke is, education is wasted on youth. I was blessed to have the education that I had, and particularly in retrospect, to be in the program of liberal studies, which is a humanities major at Notre Dame. And it gave me the desire to be a lifelong learner. And in the past, I have read a lot more than I have probably in the last 8 or 9 years. for whatever reason. I think I've read a lot, but a lot of it's been on the iPad, reading articles, blogs and stuff, and I want to go back and start digging back into books. But I also have a lot of things I would like to get down on paper. We helped start our school 26 years ago, and have been emeritus for 3 years now, and I don't want them to have to reinvent the wheel, and I want to, given all the time and effort and money I've put into that, I want what moved us to start it in the first place, I want that to be known and hopefully at least attempted to be lived out. I want to have fun.
That's awesome.
And
you should. 46 years? Should.
It'll make it a little easier to go Notre Dame football games.
Is semi-retirement going to make it easier, or is the fact that Brian Kelly's not the coach going to make it easier?
That never stopped me, but I didn't enjoy it as much as I hope I will enjoy it. However, I am planning to meet Aaron at Auburn first weekend in October when LSU comes to Auburn.
Yeah.
We can cheer against him. I know that's a lot of trouble to go to, but really looking forward to it.
I hear you. All right, Harold, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
That was
awesome.
fun.
This was awesome.
Good, man. Hope it
Thanks.
helped.
Yeah, this is awesome. This is great.